Okay, picture the scene. It's the 7th year after the Hijrah. It's nighttime at a Muslim camp. The fires are burning low, but nobody is sleeping. The companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, are sitting quietly. Everyone is deep in thought, in prayer, and in this absolute desperate longing. Now, this isn't just some dry moment in history. This is the build-up to a gripping, pivotal showdown. The campaign against the massive fortress complex of Khaybar had completely stalled. The Muslims were facing impenetrable walls and sheer exhaustion. And then, the Prophet spoke words that literally cut right through the dark and changed everything.
He said, "Tomorrow I will give the flag to a man who loves Allah and His Messenger, and whom Allah and His Messenger love, who will not turn back in flight. Allah will grant victory through him." Now just pause and think about the sheer gravity of that promise. We're talking about the greatest companions here, men profoundly revered in Islamic history, like Abu Bakr and Umar, lying awake under the night sky. And they weren't awake because they were scared of the battle. No, they were awake in this earnest, genuine hope that tomorrow morning they would be the one described as being loved by Allah and His Messenger.
Section 1. The Impregnable Threat.
So to really understand the stakes of this existential threat, we've got to look at the geography and the history. The Muslim army had marched about 150 kilometers north of Medina, and they weren't just fighting strangers. This fertile oasis was the wealthy, deeply hostile base of the Banu Nadir, the exact same group that had been expelled from Medina and had previously organized that massive 10,000-strong coalition against the Muslims at the Battle of the Trench. So basically, as long as Khaybar was standing, Medina simply was not safe.
And the disparity between these two forces, it's honestly staggering. On one side, you have the defenders locked inside multiple layered fortresses built from this impenetrable black volcanic stone. They had endless supplies and legendary individual champions, like the feared warrior Marhab. On the other side, the Muslim army. We're talking maybe 1,400 to 1,600 men. They had absolutely no siege engines, no catapults, and they were already experiencing early exhaustion from days of a tense stalemate. The tension was incredibly high.
Section 2. The Lion's Turning Point.
All right, so the morning after that sleepless night finally comes. The companions are gathered, hearts in their throats, right? Everyone is waiting to see who gets the flag. But the Prophet asks for someone who wasn't even in the hopeful crowd. He asks, "Where is Ali ibn Abi Talib?" And the companions respond, "Well, Ali has sore eyes. They're so inflamed and painful that he can barely even see. He was physically unable to fight, but the Prophet calls for him anyway." The historical accounts tell us that the Prophet miraculously healed Ali's inflamed eyes right then and there with his blessed hands. But before handing him the flag, he gives a crucial instruction. He says to advance gently, and before doing anything else, invite the enemy to Islam. The Prophet tells him that guiding just a single person is better than possessing red camels, which at the time was literally the greatest wealth in Arabia.
What happens next goes down incredibly fast. Ali approaches the fortress. Out walks Marhab, the absolute most feared champion in the oasis, and he's basically shouting out battle poetry about his own invincibility. Ali doesn't back down. He fires back with his own verse, comparing himself to a lion. And the duel? It's over almost instantly. With a single fatal strike, Ali defeats the invincible Marhab. But then, and this is the wild part, Ali reaches the massive, locked fortress gate, and he literally tears it from its hinges all by himself. It's just this unbelievable moment of sheer physical and spiritual power.
Section 3. Victory and its costs.
You can imagine the psychological shock of Marhab's defeat. It completely shattered the myth of Khaybar's invincibility. It was the domino that caused these supposedly impregnable fortresses to systematically fall one by one. But you know, this victory came with some incredible human complexities. Among the captives was Safiya bint Foryou. She was a noblewoman whose father had actually organized the coalition against Medina, and she had just lost her husband in the battle. The Prophet recognized her status, and instead of treating her as just another captive, he offered her a genuine choice. He said she could have her freedom and go back to her people, or she could stay and become his wife. Safiya chose to stay. She accepted Islam and became one of the mothers of the believers. It's a profoundly humanizing moment of giving someone real agency right in the middle of 7th century warfare.
But the danger definitely wasn't over. After the battle, a local woman named Zainab asked around to find out which part of the sheep the Prophet preferred to eat. When she was told it was the shoulder, she took a roasted sheep and absolutely loaded it with a potent poison. The Prophet took a single bite and immediately stopped. The tradition tells us that in a miraculous moment, he announced that the bone itself had warned him the meat was poisoned.
So they bring Zainab forward, and she confesses. But her reasoning is chillingly logical. She says, "I thought if you were a king, I will be rid of you, and if you were a prophet, you will be warned." This whole incident brilliantly illustrates the prophet's character, as it's described in the sources. I mean, a companion had actually died from eating that meat, and the prophet himself would suffer physical pain from that poison for the rest of his life. Yet his astonishing initial response wasn't immediate blinding rage. It was thoughtful engagement. It was mercy. He actually acknowledged the logic in her statement.
Section 4. A new administrative model. Okay, so the fortresses have fallen. The threats are neutralized. But now you have a practical problem. How do you actually govern this newly conquered super-wealthy territory? Well, the Jewish farmers of Khaybar, who hadn't been part of the fighting, proposed that they stay and work the land they knew so intimately. And the prophet agreed to a highly pragmatic sharecropping arrangement. They would keep 50% of the produce, and the Muslim state would get the other 50%. By keeping the local agricultural experts on their ancestral land, this incredibly practical 50-50 split really benefited everyone, and it became a foundational model for future Islamic administration.
And the impact of this single agreement? It literally transformed the historically impoverished Muslim community overnight. Think about it. For the very first time, they had a reliable annual income. The Muhajirun, the immigrants from Mecca, finally gained long-term economic security. That massive military threat from the north was completely neutralized. And, beautifully, this newfound stability meant that the early Muslim exiles who had been living in Abyssinia for years could finally return home safely.
Section 5. Enduring Lessons of Khaybar. So, what does this all mean for us? Let's distill these dense historical events from the source material into some clear takeaways. First, the aspiration to serve. Hoping to be chosen for a great task is exactly the right mindset, just like those companions waiting eagerly in the night. Second, the chosen one is often totally unexpected. Remember, Ali wasn't even in the crowd. Third, physical limits do not stop divine choice. Ali's sore eyes didn't disqualify him, because the one who calls can also equip you for the task. And fourth, victory still requires human agency. Ali still had to match out there and swing the sword. The victory is granted, sure, but it's granted through human effort.
The texts also emphasize 4 more crucial points. Number 5, always invite and offer peace before resorting to fighting. 6, prophets experience very real, very raw human pain. The historical accounts clearly state that the prophets suffered lifelong physical pain from that poison. Which brings us to lesson 7. His mercy wasn't just because he was immune to suffering. No, it was a conscious, deliberate choice to be merciful, even when he was deeply hurt. And finally, number 8. Economic security is a trust. It's meant to be managed and shared, not just hoarded away.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The flag is still being given today. Who is ready to carry it? That historical longing of the companions in the night, it isn't just history. It's a direct question about our own capacity for impact today. If you want to be the one through whom good enters the world, you have to prepare yourself to be ready when your name is called. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.